Do you have an area that you like to study, an area of expertise?
I tend to study couple and co-parenting relationships and looking at the ways in which we can bolster and strengthen those relationships and the kinds of things that are influencing the development of, as well as the outcomes of those relationships for parents and children.
I wanted to start by asking you about your recent research on technoference. First of all, what is the term and what does it mean?
So technoference, that was something that I came up with, I think back in 2012. Was thinking a lot about what I was seeing around me, which was this idea that individuals were distracted by their phones and face-to-face interactions, both in our romantic relationships as well as in parenting. So technoference is technology and interference put together, so technoference. And just, it's a term that deals with the everyday, very minor sorts of intrusions and interruptions that our technology devices may elicit.
For example?
Really, it can include anything. So it could be like the beeps and the buzzes that just happen all the time because our phones are with us all the time. So if my phone went off right now in the middle of our conversation and I picked it up and I checked it real quick and put it back in my pocket, and just thinking about how that influences or intrudes upon our face-to-face interaction, it might change the quality of that interaction.
It's really a pretty new phenomenon, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we've studied technology use and the ways that different technologies have influenced relationships for a long time, but how connected we are to our devices and how these mobile devices are with us all the time, that's really what is new.
Tell me a little bit about your recent research. Can you tell me if you had a hypothesis and what you and your colleagues looked at?
Before this most recent study, we had thought a lot about this idea of technoference. And we had done a couple of other studies where we looked at couple relationships and also co-parenting relationships. And we were thinking about how much these devices were intruding upon these relationships. And we found that it did. You know, people were perceiving that that was happening. And then when it happened, they seemed to have lower relationship satisfaction and not be as coordinated in their co-parenting and things like that. And so as we moved forward, it was only kind of natural for us to be thinking about, well, what's this doing with parent-child relationships? What's it doing to children? And so we went from there. And if you think about ourselves, when we feel, what's the word? If we feel that someone's not really paying as much attention to us as we would like, you know, we might feel a little upset or a little frustrated with the situation, or at least not as happy about it. But if you think about children, they don't have the same sorts of regulation abilities, the same ways of controlling their emotions. And so we figured that if this is happening, which we believed it was in parent-child relationships, then it would influence child behavior, right? Because they'd be more likely, they're not going to just kind of think about it, they might react.
Tell me a little bit about the study, the parameters of the study, and how you looked at this.
We looked at 170 couples with a young child, age 5 or younger, and we had them, this one was survey research, so we had them fill out different surveys about their own use, the kinds of what we call problematic tendencies that they might have. It's kind of like, you know, do I feel like I use my phone too much? Those sorts of things. And then we also had them rate how often they felt certain devices like cell phones or tablets or computers were interrupting or intruding upon their interactions with their child, as well as then their children's behavior. So thinking about whether their child elicited or had certain sorts of behavior problems that they were seeing, such as acting out or being hyperactive or sulking or crying a lot or those sorts of behaviors.
And what did you find?
What we found was that those individuals, those parents who said that they had a harder time managing their own phone use were the ones that were more likely to be seeing more of this technoference occurring in their relationship with their child or in their activities and time with their child. And if that was happening often, then what we also saw is they were seeing more problem behaviors in their child. So their child was more likely to be acting out or hyperactive or crying or something like that.
Was there an amount of time that parents used their phone that was kind of a cutoff? Well, if you use it more than 2 hours, there were more problems. Was there an association?
I don't know if we have a straight cutoff in terms of, well, you shouldn't use it this much. It's really just thinking about when you're using the device. If there are times when you could use it that would be perfectly fine when you're not interacting with your child, but in times when you are interacting, if it is intruding in that relationship, then the child may start to react and notice that I'm not being paid attention to. You're missing my bids for attention and the needs that I have at this moment, those sorts of things. And really, the sample that we had is a pretty middle-class, fairly well-off sample. So, high-functioning sorts of families. So in a sense, I would say there's some underreporting going on. Okay? I think we all do it a lot more than we actually realize we're doing it. So they were rating that was only happening maybe once or twice a day or something like that. It was fairly rare in a lot of people in terms of their ratings. But we're still seeing these relationships even when they're saying that it's kind of rare. So it makes me think that if we really realized how much we were doing it, or that we noticed individuals doing it even more than that it could be even more problematic.
What were some of the behaviors, the bad behaviors that you were talking about? We
didn't actually measure the behavior. We just actually had them rate how often certain devices interrupted their interactions. So I mean, it really could have been anything like I was saying earlier in terms of, the phone goes off and so you check it and then put it back in your pocket, or it could be that you start to get bored a little bit with the time you're spending with your child, because I think we can all admit that, watching the same movie for the 50th time, maybe you're going to get your phone out and see what that last work email was or something, right? And sometimes children pick up on those things is the problem. Or sometimes our children need something and we didn't notice it because the phone was distracting us.
What are some practical tips for households, for parents to think about in terms of controlling their technology use?
In thinking about how to control it, I think the best thing we can do, because I don't want people to feel guilty about this. I think as parents, we all have enough guilt already, and we are often trying to do our very best already. So in thinking about it, we just need to be mindful. We need to realize that this is something that's going on now. It's going on for all of us, even those that maybe think they're immune or not doing it. Just the fact that we have these devices with us all the time is going to create these little situations that are going to happen. And so, one, realizing it's going to happen so that you're actually thinking about it and trying to think about when or if you should pull your device out at certain situations, certain times when you're with your child. And then with that, one thing that can help, and others have suggested this as well, like the American Academy of Pediatrics, is thinking about if there's particular areas of your home, so we call those tech-free zones, maybe establishing a certain part of your home that's going to be tech-free, or some tech-free times of day. So like a tech-free zone might be, for example, that you decide that, well, when I am with my children in their bedrooms, I'm not going to take my device. That's going to be a time when I don't really need to be on it. I'm going to be with them. I'm going to spend just one-on-one focused time with them and let them know how important they are to me. Or if we're thinking about tech-free times, maybe there's meal times. Families will come up with things that work for them, and I think families should come up with what works best for them. But I have seen a lot that kind of decide that mealtime is going to be a time when all the devices are put away and that they can have a little bit higher quality interactions.
I think it might have been on suggestions that were contained within your research. Stack your phones? Is that one way to control the use at mealtime or other times during the day?
Well, I think families should think about how they want to do it for themselves. For some individuals have a pretty strong attachment to their phones. For example, just in my own classes that I teach, I don't have my students, I tell my students that we need to stay off our phones and we're going to do some learning right now, but I don't make them all turn their phones off, if that makes sense. And the reason why I don't do that is because there's enough research out there that shows that there's some of us that have really grown very attached to our phones. It's become an extension of ourselves in a lot of ways. And if I make them turn them off, then they might get pretty anxious and not really able to focus on what's going on. So you have to judge for your own family some individuals might get pretty upset at the fact of having to stack their phone, as some call it. So what I would say is thinking about what works best for your own family. For some, they have decided that, yeah, there's a certain time, maybe during dinner time, and they'll just put it in the basket or something like that. But for others, maybe putting it in your pocket's fine. I guess it depends on the family.
This is something that you guys have studied. Have you seen a shift in behavior in the children if parents consciously cut down on their technology use?
That's where we need to head as a field. That we do not know yet. There's plenty, like the American Academy of Pediatrics, myself, plenty of us are saying there's something going on here that we need to be mindful about, and I think we need to change it. But I don't think we've really looked at yet on if we change it, whether things get better or how that ends up influencing the family relationships or child behavior yet. So that's something I think we need to do.
What are your next steps from the findings from this research?
For myself, right now, we already have it in the works where we're thinking about these things longitudinally, because that last study was really just cross-sectional data at one point in time, a snapshot of these relationships. So really we're thinking about, well, what does it look like over time? If this is happening at one point in time, is that making child behavior get worse by the next point in time? Because I really believe what we have going on here is a lot of what we call bidirectional relationships. It's kind of like circular causality, that parents are reacting probably to child's stressful behavior, right? So maybe they withdraw a little bit more with technology. And also as they withdraw more with technology, then that technology intrudes in the relationship with their child, so that their child then reacts to that. And we end up with kind of this vicious cycle where if they're not mindful of that and maybe change it a little bit at some point, it can spiral a little bit out of control. Maybe it won't get super bad, but maybe the child's behavior or their relationship wouldn't be as strong as it could have been. And then also thinking about that on a daily basis. I work a lot with daily data, trying to think about on a daily basis, on days when this happens more, do we also see that child behavior is worse on those days and those sorts of things.
Is there anything I didn't ask you that you would want people to know?
I think I'd just reiterate the fact that don't feel guilty about it. Everyone's doing it. Absolutely everyone is doing it, even if they think they're not. And just really trying to, maybe another strategy might be to download one of those apps that tracks your use. Because if you do that, that might start to, because you might think that you're not really doing it, or that you're pretty good about controlling yourself. But if you use an app like that, it'll help you to see, well, there is a certain time of day where I actually get on it every single day. And that happens to be when I'm with my kids, and I didn't even really think about that. It gives you kind of a starting point, right? It won't change you, but it gives you a starting point to realize, oh, okay, I am using it a little bit more than I thought I am. And it might motivate you to change a little bit, or give you some areas to change.
Tell me a little bit about your background, where you got your undergraduate degrees, master's degrees.
I got my undergraduate degree in psychology at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, with a minor in family life. And then I went from there to Penn State, where I got both my master's and my PhD in human development and family science.